All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Gridiron Gurus podcast. Damien and Nick here are going to be doing a 7-round mock draft as we enter April for the Miami Dolphins. This is a team that has 7 selections in the top 95 picks, so they're going to be in a deep rebuild. They have an opportunity to do a lot of damage. They signed Malik Willis to a bit of a prove-it deal, right? 3-year, $60 million. This is a team that has a lot of clear needs, and I think they could do a lot of different things with their selections. But I think here in the first round, Nick, wide receiver is a clear priority, and I think Mekhi Lemon makes a lot of sense. And I had Mansour Delane as their pick in a lot of the mock drafts I've done for Miami. But I think with the receiving room they have now, they need to go out there and beef up the talent immensely. I think Malik Washington's a guy that has some upside. They signed Jalen Tolbert as well. Some respectable players, right? If they were the third or fourth option, not the top dogs in the receiving room. Mekhi Lemon is a guy that is going to be tremendous. This is a guy that just does everything well. He's a very good football player because he's competitive. Just has a knack for being a playmaker, showcases strong hands, has elite focus, top tier nuances in his body control and locating the ball. He's not a burner vertically, has a bit of a slower first step, not the strongest accelerator, and defeating press coverage could be difficult, but he can play in the slot as well. He has great yard after catch ability. And then in the back half of the round, Colton Hood. I think that Jeff Hafley, now being the head coach, is absolutely going to want to find some of his own guys that come in for a secondary that needs to also increase its talent. And Hood, he's really good in man with his stickiness and the impressive technique, really good patience and lateral movement. Pretty good in zone as well, has a quick trigger. And I think this is a guy that's going to definitely fall down a little bit because he missed all of last year with that torn ACL. This makes a lot of sense, Nick. I think I need to go receiver and corner in some type of order in this first round. With Hafley, though, knowing this is going to be a deep rebuild, let's maybe focus on guys that are going to fit what we want to do on defense, and that's why I think Mansour Delane could absolutely be a player they take early on, because this is going to be a slow rebuild, right, and it's going to take time. So I could see this going a few different ways, but I think receiver and corner, that's what they're going to do on the first night of the draft.
It's no secret the Dolphins are entering a deep rebuild in South Florida, and they have a lot of work to do. Hafley is taking over a squad that is going to underhaul a complete revamp, and they're going to do a lot with this team, I think. And this is solid, right? Having 2 first-round picks is always a good start. Having one in the top 15 is really good as well. And when you look at this wide receiving room, they have Malik Washington. They signed Jalen Tolbert. They signed Tutu Atwell, but they don't really have a whole lot of depth outside of that. Taj Washington, I thought, was a player that had some potential. Theo Weiss, same deal with him. But, again, this is not a room where there's really that kind of standout guy, and I think Mekhi Lemon could be that standout guy. He was really great at USC, certainly one of the better players in this draft at that position. And yeah, some of the size, maybe in the athleticism is a bit of a concern, but football IQ, the body of control, incredible hands, really solid route running ability, good speed on him. 5'11", about 200 pounds. I think he can really be solid when push comes to shove. And again, not exactly the most ideal size in the world, but I think this is a receiver that you can do a lot with and get a lot out of immediately. Here, this is a team that's going to need depth in multiple parts of the field. I think they're going to certainly need depth at wide receiver. I think running back's probably the only position where they don't need to add depth right now. I think the running back room is pretty solid for the Dolphins. But outside of that, they had a lot of work to do across the board, and I think they have some work to do in the secondary. Colton Hood, I think, is a really solid prospect as well. Obviously, coming off the injury is something that you're certainly concerned about, but he has a lot of high upside potential and is a very talented player overall. Yes, slightly inconsistent, but I think he's a guy that could be really good. Only had that one full season as a starter. So again, certainly you're taking a bit of a risk here, but I think later in the first round, it's not so bad considering that the secondary room, especially the cornerback room, really, Storm Duck, Darrell Baker they signed from Tennessee. They don't really have a ton of depth or high-end talent, and they really kind of need to add some pieces. Colton Hood, plugging in a guy that's defensively strong, needs a little bit of work, kind of a project. When this type of rebuild you're undertaking, I think you can take a little bit of a gamble on a guy that has potential, hasn't quite exactly played as much football as maybe somebody else on the board, and it could really work out for a Dolphins team that does need help on the defensive side of the football.
Now we're going to move to what they hope to accomplish on day 2, where they have 5 selections. That's where you can have some fun because there's going to be a lot of great football players available here. Lee Hunter, one of my favorite players in the draft. If he falls to 43, you got to make it happen. This is a top-tier run defender, incredible strength to shed blocks and get into the backfield with force, good explosiveness, offered consistent pass rush pressure. One-on-one, he is a nightmare to go up against. I think this is going to be one of the best players when it's all said and done in this class. And then they go to the board for another receiver and another corner, Nick. Skylar Bell. This is a guy that is a good natural route runner, strong short area quickness, has some nice patience and understands leverage. The quickness and the wiggle he possesses is just very impressive. He's a good option out of the slot. So, of course, he's a little bit undersized, but that's fine. That's not really his game, right? That lesser size allows you to have the qualities that he does. Dalen Everett, patience and press. I love the instincts, physical tackler, pretty fast runner, does well in big games. He's a good outside corner, has length and physicality, nice closing speed, showed the ability to blitz as well. Certainly has a lot of issues when it comes to consistency. But I think Everett is another really good fit for what Halfley wants to do on this side of the ball. And then they also pick up an offensive lineman in Jalen Farmer, an aggressive blocker of a mean streak, some great length as well, some nice size, nice heavy base as well. He could be a stout anchor. He's proven to be an effective lead blocker. This is a nice variety, Nick, and they continue to load up in the two biggest areas of concern, again, receiver and corner.
This is certainly something that could really work out well for this team. I wouldn't be hate if they drafted Lee Hunter at 30th overall. I think he's got that sort of potential to kind of creep into that late first round. I think he'll go early second round. He's a player that's super talented across the board. Hunter was really good for that Texas Tech defensive line that was absolutely lethal this past season and ended up pushing them into the college football playoff. He was just a strong asset that was able to really beat up and attack offensive lines week in, week out. He was able to get in the backfield, produce sacks, and be a key contributor on what was a phenomenal defensive line. You look at Skylar Bell. This guy had over 1,200 yards receiving this past season at UConn. He's a player that's really dynamic. I think the speed on him is really solid. Maybe you're concerned about the size, and again, maybe you're a bit weary if you're taking two sort of potentially undersized wide receivers in Bell and Mekhi Lemon, but I think this is a guy that really is solid. He's got high football IQ. He's been playing the game for a while. He was really good, and the competition with him, he was really able to step up to that level. Has pretty solid athleticism still, and I think he's a really good slot receiver that has some really high upside potential to move him around and be involved. Dalen Everett, what you're gonna get with a Georgia player. This is gonna be someone that's gonna be productive on the ball, someone's gonna be productive in coverage, and be a really big key asset for a defensive unit. I think Jeff Halfley would love to have a guy like that who is a key asset and someone that can really play the football, has high football IQ, which Everett does. Jalen Farmer is a very interesting one here. I think he's a player that's a little bit underrated as a prospect on the offensive line. This Miami offensive line needs some help, right? They're going to have to bring pieces in. I think you're getting a guy who has SEC experience and Farmer, who was really solid for Kentucky this past year. It wasn't a great season, right? But I think he's a guard that is really solid. He's pretty good in pass pro, which I think is really solid when you have a younger quarterback in Malik Willis, who's a little bit inexperienced that you're kind of gambling on. Same thing with having Quinn Ewers further down the depth chart. Having someone in pass pro that is really solid and could really contribute strongly to that offensive line like Farmer can, I think could be a really solid high upside move for the Dolphins here.
Also have them snagging Rayshon Benny in the third round. Pretty good run defender, hard to move off his spot. Love the hand usage, and of course the scheme versatility with him is pretty impressive. Moving to what we have projected for day 3. The picks cool off a bit. They only have 4 selections here after a monster first and second and third round. Jacoby Lane in the 4th is a receiver with a lot of upside, keeping the USC guys together, an elite contested catch guy. I think he has some strong hands as well. Uses his frame to box out defenders very well. Also not really a speed guy, but a competitive football player nonetheless. J.C. Davis at tackle. This is a potential versatile player because he has great size, strong lower half, durability, has heavy hands. He started a lot of games, has proven to be a really good pass protector in his career for Illinois. They can maybe move him to guard, right? I think it's possible. And in the 7th round, Robert Spears-Jennings, a guy that is a heavy hitter in the back end. His athletic ability, the ability to match up and man coverage, I think, is definitely worrisome. But he can come make plays in the box, be a respectable run defender, and he can really set the tone for your defense. So maybe not a guy that will be a multi-year starter, but someone I think can carve out a role on your football team. Maybe a special teamer, right? Because he does play really hard. And then Tyreek Chappelle, another corner, I think he makes a lot of sense because this is a guy who's versatile, has spent plenty of time in the slot. He's played out wide, has been productive in his career. Biggest problem with Chappelle is he's not really progressed. Early on in his career, it looked like he was going to be a superstar, right? And it just never really blossomed into that. Had some injury issues as well. And when he was on the field full time, it wasn't all that great. So Chappelle, it's worth a flyer in the 7th round, Nick. I think Halfley could probably get some more out of him. And I think that would be another pretty good selection for Miami.
I think it's worth a flyer in the 7th round on Chappelle. This is a player that I really like. He was someone I loved early on in his career at Texas A&M. I thought he could be a big difference maker in the SEC. He didn't quite, live up to that level that I was hoping that he would get to. Played 550 snaps last year. He battled some injuries prior to that, and he was solid at times. for that team. He was good in his 330 coverage snaps. I think he's a player that's really solid. I like what his frame looks like, 5'11", 180. He's a guy that's got good football IQ. Again, it didn't quite reach the level that I was hoping for, but in the 7th round, I think you can do way worse than him, who's a player that played, in the SEC and was able to get, solid reps, especially this past season. J.C. Davis is a very interesting one for me at left tackle. I think you'd have to play him at left tackle. I'm not entirely sure he could play guard, but maybe they would be able to figure something out. He had 775 snaps last year at left tackle, only gave up three sacks on those snaps and about 415 pass block. He was pretty good in pass block, had some decent experience in run block as well. I think Davis is worth grabbing late in this 5th round here. Jacoby Lane, I like what he can do. Not exactly the fastest player, but I think he's really solid on the slot as well, and I think you can really get him involved and see what he can do. And then Robert Spears-Jennings is a player that has some good football IQ, again, and could be a really solid add for a defense that needs help. It's very clear that, when you look at what is going to happen in this defensive side of the ball, Hafley's going to want to bring in a lot of guys who are playmakers. You saw 42 tackles out of Spears-Jennings last year. He was solid. Had 9 missed tackles. Certainly got to clean that up. About 600 defensive snaps for the Sooners. He was pretty good. Struggled against Texas. That was certainly a weaker game for him, but he had some solid games early on in the season. I think, the themes for this mock draft, right, is addressing the offensive weapons that they're lacking and addressing a secondary that needs some help. They did some work in free agency in the secondary and at wide receiver, but not enough in either position long term. I think the running back room is good here. I think the defensive line is pretty solid for this team. They clearly are investing in Malik Willis. They got to work on the offensive line, the secondary, and certainly the wide receiving room. We had them addressing those 3 position groups that are very key and very needed for the Dolphins. So that could really be a solid draft. They can get a lot of key pieces that can be contributors over time.
For today's episode, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.